Welcome to the deep dive. So have you ever wondered, maybe while you're stuck in awful bumper-to-bumper traffic?
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst.
Right, or I don't know, just scrolling through the evening news and you think, are we as a species just fundamentally good or inherently bad?
It's pretty much the ultimate binary, though.
Exactly. We usually treat human nature like this giant philosophical coin flip. Heads, we are born good, just, waiting for a harsh world to ruin us.
Right.
Tails, we are born evil, and we desperately need laws and rules and societal pressure just to keep our inner demons in check.
And that specific debate has fueled, thousands of years of theology.
Yeah.
Massive political movements, endless late-night arguments.
Oh, totally.
Are we angels corrupted by society, or are we beasts temporarily held in a cage of civilization?
Well, toss that coin right out the window. Today, we are looking at a philosophy that completely rejects both sides of that argument.
Yeah, it completely flips the script.
What if the problem isn't the coin at all? What if the problem is the slot machine you are dropping it into?
Which requires a profound shift in how we view our own choices, honestly.
To understand this shift, we are exploring a really fascinating essay today titled Man is Not Born of Original Sin. It's authored by Su Feng, translated by Trans, and edited by Kair,
Yeah, and this document serves as a core outline for the philosophy of Lifechanyuan.
which is a spiritual and philosophical community, right?
Exactly. And it heavily quotes the teachings of a figure known as the Kinkun Buddha.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to figure out how this framework throws out the entire nature is good versus nature is evil debate.
Because it really does just discard it completely.
Right. And in its place, the author proposes this highly mechanical, almost, well, a structural explanation for human suffering.
Yeah. It connects everything from the neutrality of computer code to the daily nightmare of sharing a tiny bathroom, all the way up to massive geopolitical revolutions.
Which is a wild leap, but it makes so much sense when you break it down.
What makes Feng's approach so compelling is that he doesn't just offer abstract spiritual comfort. He demands that we look at the very tangible, physical architecture of how we live.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the essay kicks off with a massive claim.
It really does.
Feng writes that good and evil are simply not properties of human nature, period.
Right. According to the Kinkun Buddha, on the level of pure consciousness, there's absolutely no right or wrong.
But the author uses a very specific term here, the alaya consciousness. Before we go any further, we should probably define what Feng means by that.
Yeah, that's important. So, alaya consciousness is originally a Sanskrit term found in certain Buddhist traditions.
Okay.
But in the context of this essay, Feng adapts it to describe the baseline consciousness of the entire universe.
So like the foundational layer of everything.
Exactly. Think of it as a cosmic black box or a pure, neutral recording device. It only truthfully records data.
Just the facts, basically.
Right. It tracks the material cycles of galaxies, and it records the consciousness and activities of all life. In this pure baseline state, there is no judgment taking place at all.
None.
None. There is no moral weight. It is merely raw data collection.
But, obviously good and evil do exist in our lived reality, right?
Yeah.
People do terrible, destructive things, and people do wonderfully selfless things.
Of course.
If our baseline consciousness is just a neutral flight recorder, where does morality actually enter the picture?
Morality enters the moment that consciousness interacts with the physical world.
Okay.
Feng introduces a concept he calls material logic.
Yeah.
He argues that good and evil only crystallize when we use our neutral consciousness to achieve physical, material results.
So the thought itself isn't bad until you do something with it.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
According to this framework, an action's rightness or wrongness is determined by whether it meets the material logic of creating totality.
Totality meaning like a state of completeness, harmony, or something that sustains life.
That is the core idea. Actions that meet the material logic of building and sustaining totality are considered right and good.
Okay.
Actions that fracture or destroy that totality are evil. The morality doesn't exist in the invisible thought itself. It is entirely dependent on the physical execution and the real-world consequence of that thought.
The essay uses an analogy about computer information that I think clarifies this beautifully.
Well, the binary code one. Yeah, it's the perfect modern parallel.
Right, because the ones and zeros stored on a hard drive are inherently neutral.
Exactly. The code itself lacks any moral alignment. Morality only applies based on how that information is executed in physical reality.
Like how you actually use the software.
Right. The exact same foundational scientific principles can be deployed to improve crop yields and feed millions. Or, they can be used to engineer weapons that destroy whole cities.
So it's kind of like electricity.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, a raw electric current flowing through a copper wire has no innate moral compass. It is just energy. It only becomes good if you use it to power a hospital ventilator, or evil if you use it to intentionally shock and harm someone. The consciousness is just the current.
And the application is what carries the moral weight. And if we accept that our baseline consciousness is just a neutral current, well, that forces us to look somewhere else entirely for the origin of our bad behavior.
Because it's not coming from inside of us.
Right. If a destructive outcome isn't stemming from our innate nature, then the friction must be coming from the environment we are plugged into.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most relatable part of this entire philosophy.
Oh, absolutely.
If we aren't born bad, why do we constantly snap at each other, hold grudges, and commit sins?
We all do it.
Xu provides a very unapologetic answer. He states that the root cause of human suffering over thousands of years is actually incomplete and imperfect social operating mechanisms.
In other words, bad systems force bad behavior.
Yeah.
He argues that if an operating mechanism is complete and perfect, people simply will not sin. The conditions for sin wouldn't even exist.
Right, because there's no friction.
Exactly. But if the operating mechanism is flawed, it practically guarantees that human beings will commit sins regardless of their inner purity.
The Lifechanyuan Buddha illustrates this with the most visceral, everyday scenario imaginable. The toilet analogy.
It really strips all the mysticism away and just looks at pure plumbing.
It's so true. Okay, imagine an apartment where 6 people live, but the floor plan only includes 1 toilet.
A nightmare.
Total nightmare. Every single morning, 6 people have to get ready for work at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Because of this restricted physical design, conflicts are absolutely guaranteed.
Yeah, someone's going to bang on the door.
Someone is going to get impatient, voices will be raised, and resentment is going to build. The text likens this resulting daily friction to sin.
And the critical insight here is diagnosing the true source of that friction.
Right.
If you resolve the unreasonable physical limitation by building a second bathroom, the morning conflicts immediately lessen.
And if you build a 3rd bathroom, the conflicts essentially disappear.
Exactly. The anger, the yelling, the selfishness, none of that was innate to those 6 roommates.
They weren't born with a biological need to yell at each other at 7 a.m.
No. The sin was a design flaw in the apartment's architecture.
What's fascinating here is how Xu expands on this with another powerful visual, the presence of flies.
Oh yeah, this one is really stark.
He asks the reader to consider where flies come from. If you walk into a beautiful, meticulously cleaned, hygienic room, you will not see any flies.
Right, because there's nothing for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you walk into a damp, dirty, unkempt environment with rotting food, flies are swarming everywhere.
Yeah.
He uses this to state a fact that speaks louder than words. Flies do not magically materialize out of nowhere. They are generated by a decaying environment.
And by extending that logic to human behavior, he shifts the burden of blame away from the individual soul and places it squarely onto the societal architect.
Think about your own life for a second. Just you, listening to this. Think about how many times you have been intensely frustrated, or maybe you acted completely out of character at work.
Or you snapped at a customer service rep.
Exactly. Was it because you woke up that morning as an inherently sinful person?
Probably not.
Or was it because the system you were forced to navigate, the endless bureaucracy at the DMV, or a fundamentally broken software interface at your job, or a poorly designed parking lot, was just incredibly flawed?
You weren't a bad person. You were just one of 6 people trying to use one toilet.
It is a deeply empowering perspective, honestly, because it alleviates that heavy burden of personal inherent guilt.
It does. But
Yeah.
simultaneously, it places a massive collective responsibility on us
Yeah.
regarding how we construct our shared reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to look at how Xu scales this concept up.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back.
Right. The essay doesn't stop at shared apartments or dirty rooms. It takes this logic of bad mechanisms and applies it to global human history.
And just to pause for a second,
Yeah.
just to be completely clear up front, our goal today isn't to endorse the specific political or historical conclusions in this essay.
Oh, absolutely not. Whether it's left-wing or right-wing examples, we are not taking any sides here.
Right. We're just impartially exploring how Xu Feng's framework analyzes large-scale human conflict
Yeah,
based purely on the source material.
exactly. We're just the messengers. So, keeping that neutrality in mind, how does he apply this to history?
Well, he maintains a very strict cause and effect analysis when looking at massive historical upheavals. For instance, he examines Chinese peasant uprisings and the revolution led by the Chinese Communist Party.
Right. And he explicitly asks if peasants and workers naturally possessed a desire to revolt, rebel, and shed blood.
And his answer is a resounding absolutely not.
Okay.
He argues that these revolutions were not born from an innate human desire for violence or dominance. They were entirely the byproduct of bad social operating mechanisms.
Like what, specifically?
Specifically, he points to the unreasonable distribution of the means of production at the time. By his logic, if the mechanism of resource distribution had been designed fairly and perfectly, the uprising simply would never have occurred.
Because the environment would have been clean, so the flies of violent revolution would not have spawned?
Exactly. He applies that exact same structural logic to government corruption, too.
Oh, the Singapore comparison.
Right. He compares Singapore to China, noting that Singapore historically experiences less government corruption.
And he asks the reader, is this because Chinese officials have innately corrupt hearts, while Singaporean officials possess pure hearts?
Which he rejects completely.
Yeah.
He claims it is simply because the governmental operating mechanisms are different. One system's floor plan breeds corruption, and the other's minimizes it.
The essay even tackles the massive global crisis of overpopulation.
Yeah, this is a big one.
At the time of writing, Shuifeng notes the Earth's population nearing 6.8 billion. Obviously, we're higher than that now, but the philosophical point remains.
Right.
He points to the rapid depletion of resources, fierce daily competition, and the overt and covert geopolitical conflicts that keep humanity anxious.
And he completely rejects the idea that this anxiety is due to human sinfulness.
Yeah, he squarely blames our overarching social operating systems for failing to rationally manage the reality of our population density and natural resources.
Which is a very consistent application of his rule, but
But I do want to push back on one of the examples he uses, because it is definitely the most controversial application of this theory in the text.
oh, the marriage argument.
Yeah. As Sufeng brings up the institution of marriage and the traditional family unit. He argues that anger between spouses, affairs, and bigamy are all caused by the survival mechanisms of marriage and family.
He really goes there.
He goes so far as to claim that if the operating mechanism of marriage didn't exist, these specific human conflicts could be completely avoided.
It is certainly his most radical application of the one-toilet apartment theory.
But, does eliminating the mechanism of marriage actually remove the conflict? Or does it just change the nature of the game and create an entirely different set of problems?
How do you mean?
Well, if you tear down the walls of the apartment entirely just to stop people from fighting over the bathroom, you might solve that specific argument. But now everyone is standing in an open field fighting off the elements.
Right.
You haven't solved human jealousy or insecurity. You've just removed the framework that was organizing it.
That is a highly valid critique of his example. Sufeng assumes that the legal and social mechanism of marriage itself is the primary restrictive element.
Yeah.
He posits that without the rigid exclusionary structure of a traditional family unit, the specific sins of infidelity or bigamy wouldn't conceptually exist.
Right.
Because, well, the boundary you'd be crossing is gone.
Right, but there would just be new boundaries.
Exactly, your point stands. Replacing one set of material logic with an open-ended structure might simply bring new, unforeseen complexities.
Yeah.
However, within the logic of his essay, his overarching point is that the structure always dictates the friction. Change the structure, and you change the nature of the friction.
He uses old historical sayings to back this up, too, like forcing young girls of good families to prostitute themselves or forcing boys to join the rebels,
Right.
pointing out that the system does the forcing.
Right.
But as I read through this, I hit a moment where Swiftfang seems to contradict his own premise entirely.
This raises an important question, the paradox of the beautiful soul.
Yes. Toward the end of the essay, he explicitly states, the core crisis of mankind is the crisis of the soul.
Which sounds completely contradictory.
Wait a minute. We literally just spent this entire deep dive proving that the system is the problem, not the soul. The apartment floor plan is the problem, not the roommates.
Right.
How is this not a massive contradiction within Lifechanyuan philosophy?
It really seems like a paradox at first glance.
Yes.
He even pauses to ask, are the Chanyuan values, which are the core ethical guidelines of his community, creating a contradiction here?
And how does he resolve it?
By focusing on the sequence of creation.
Meaning, who actually builds the apartment in the first place?
Precisely. You need beautiful souls to construct good social mechanisms.
Oh, I see.
If the architects of a society, the policymakers, the engineers, the leaders, have minds and intentions that are corrupt, selfish, or narrow, they will never be capable of designing a fair, complete, and perfect operating mechanism.
Because their blueprint will always be flawed.
Exactly.
Right.
So the cultivation of a beautiful soul is the absolute prerequisite. But, and this is key, merely having a beautiful soul in isolation is fundamentally insufficient.
Because if you drop a perfectly beautiful soul into a one-toilet apartment with 5 aggressive roommates,
They're going to break.
eventually that beautiful soul is going to start banging on the door and yelling just like everyone else.
The environment will eventually degrade the intention. Every time. Shuifeng states that we must use our beautiful souls to actively construct good social operating mechanisms.
Right.
If we fail to build the mechanism, those pure intentions just cannot be sustained for very long.
He uses a really relatable, slightly tragic analogy for this interaction between the soul and the mechanism. He compares it to a couple falling in love.
A scenario where the initial intentions are usually incredibly pure.
Exactly. At the very beginning, everything is perfect. Their souls are beautiful toward one another, but if they don't actively build an operating mechanism to sustain that romance,
Like what?
meaning if they don't establish communication habits or figure out how to fairly divide household chores or set healthy boundaries, what happens?
The pure love isn't enough to survive the dirty dishes.
Right. Conflicts inevitably grow. Eventually, they either break up or they endure a lifetime of painful friction. A beautiful soul without a functional daily mechanism simply cannot survive.
He creates a very clear formula for his philosophy. A beautiful soul plus a good mechanism equals totality.
Okay, I like that.
And once he establishes that formula, Suifeng spends a considerable amount of time analyzing exactly who, in our modern world, is getting this equation wrong.
And according to his framework, basically everyone is failing at one half of the equation.
Yeah, his critique is incredibly sweeping. It addresses both the spiritual and political spheres.
Let's start with the spiritual side.
Okay, so first, he looks at religions and spiritual cultivation groups. He specifically lists Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism, alongside various spiritual practice groups across India, China, and the West.
What I found fascinating was how he diagnoses their specific blind spot. He essentially says that all the chanting and praying in the world won't fix a broken societal floor plan.
That is his exact critique. He argues that these spiritual traditions focus entirely on the soul, but they completely ignore the practical establishment of good social operating mechanisms.
Which means they're missing half the formula.
Right. He claims it doesn't matter how beautifully a religious leader speaks. Relying on the promise of Jesus returning, or waiting for the reincarnation of Maitreya, or hoping for deity celestial beings to descend.
Yeah.
None of that does absolutely anything to fix the material logic of the present moment.
He even calls out groups that rely on the reappearance of the Dharmakakra, or those that use threats of impending apocalypse and catastrophes to control behavior.
Because none of those things install plumbing in the apartment.
Exactly.
He argues that relying on spells, sorcery, or escaping reality to play with abstract spiritual concepts is ultimately useless to the world if there is no functional social mechanism being actively built.
You can't meditate your way out of a broken resource distribution system.
No, you can't. So the spiritual and religious groups have the beautiful soul, but no blueprint for the apartment.
But then Shufan flips the lens and looks at political groups.
Right.
He specifically calls out Marxist and communist organizations as examples.
And he actually acknowledges their primary strength. These political groups work incredibly hard to build better social operating mechanisms.
They are entirely focused on the floor plan, the distribution of resources, the material reality of society.
Yes, but they suffer from a fatal flaw on the other side of the equation.
Wait.
According to Zuofeng, their fatal flaw is that they neglect what he calls the greatest creator and the construction of the human soul.
Okay, and just to clarify, in the context of Lifechanyuan, the greatest creator isn't necessarily like a bearded figure in the clouds, right?
No, not at all. It represents the ultimate underlying order, the fundamental truth and source of nature.
Got it.
Zuofeng asserts that if a political organization ignores this profound natural order and strips away the spiritual construction of a human soul, they will fundamentally fail.
Because the initial intention is missing.
Exactly. No matter how meticulously they design their resource distribution, building a perfect pipe system without respecting the pure source of the water leads to a sterile and ultimately destructive environment.
So what does this all mean?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this philosophy demands a complete, uncompromising synthesis.
You cannot achieve societal peace by being overly mystical and ignoring the plumbing.
Right. And you cannot achieve societal peace by being purely bureaucratic and ignoring the divine or the pure intentions of the human spirit.
Both halves of the equation are absolutely required to achieve totality.
It challenges us to look at our own communities and ask, are we over-indexing on spiritual platitudes, or are we over-indexing on cold bureaucracy?
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to summarize the ultimate, incredibly comforting takeaway that Sufeng leaves us with.
It is very reassuring.
First and foremost, man is not born into original sin. You, listening to this right now, are not inherently evil.
The text assures us that we do not carry the weight of our ancestors' mistakes. As Wei Feng writes, a king's children may not be kings, and a thief's children need not necessarily be thieves.
We are not genetically or spiritually doomed by the past.
No. And he even addresses past lives. If you believe in reincarnation and worry that you sinned in a past life, Shufeng says you have already been punished for it.
So you are starting this life with a completely clean slate.
The final definition of morality he provides is refreshingly actionable. Whether we are considered to have sinned doesn't depend on an inescapable innate corruption.
It depends entirely on our active choices in the present.
Exactly. It depends on whether we revere nature, revere life, revere the greatest creator, and actively walk in alignment with that natural order.
It all comes back to how we choose to apply our neutral consciousness to the world around us. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about physical spaces today. Shared apartments, toilets, dirty rooms, and historical governments. But think about the reality we interact with most often today.
The digital world.
Exactly. If our sins and our interpersonal conflicts are dictated by the operating mechanisms and the flow plans of our society,
Oh, I see where you're going.
what does this mean for the modern digital age? Right now, algorithms, social media platforms, and artificial intelligence are increasingly designing our social spaces.
They control our information distribution.
They're literally building our virtual apartment.
And we spend more time in those virtual apartments than we do in our physical ones.
So we have to ask, are the tech architects of today, by designing platforms that financially incentivize outrage, tribalism, and division, are they inadvertently coding new original sins into our daily behavior?
That is a terrifying thought.
Right. Are they building digital apartments that house 1 billion people but only provide one toilet?
Wow.
Or by understanding the philosophy in Shuifeng's essay, are we finally equipped to recognize these mechanisms for what they are? Can we demand better?
Can we use our beautiful souls to build the ultimate clean digital environment, a place with no flies? It is a phenomenal framework for evaluating the modern world. It really forces us to look at every single system we log into or walk into and ask, is this architecture creating totality or is it destroying it?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanisms around you, and we will see you next time.